Collinsport boys. Jule Saynes presents, of course. Here to talk about a documentary called In the Shadow of the Moon. Jule is actually in the command module.
Floating above.
He's at this point he's at the dark side of Pennsylvania,
Yes.
and by that I mean Pennsylvania. But he wishes us his best, and I don't know if you know this goes back to Jules's not quite making the Apollo program, and so he has
I think
bitterness about it.
it's a sore spot. It's a sore
Yeah.
spot.
Um, but nonetheless, we
When he should have
we're
gimbled. So,
pardon.
I said he gambled when he should have gimbled.
He gambled when he should have gambled. So this came out in 2007, and it was one of a series of. It felt like every few years there was some new Apollo documentary
Yeah.
that came out. A lot of people consider it the best of the Apollo documentaries. It's awfully good. I really like For All Mankind, which is a very good movie with music by Brian Eno of all people. It was originally released as Apollo, and it's a Criterion movie, which is terrific.
It's excellent.
And I'm also very fond of From the Earth to the Moon, the Ron Howard Tom Hanks TV series.
That was, I think, one of the earliest of the sort of commemorative ones. That was 97, I believe, somewhere.
It was somewhere around then. It was one of the first real prestigious HBO series, after The Hitchhiker and not necessarily The News. It didn't quite reach those lofty heights, but it tried.
Yes.
But it was really tremendous. Did you get to see that?
Yes, I saw that. I saw it when it was fairly new. When it was making the rounds on HBO. But yeah, I've always been sort of into Apollo stuff anyway, because as a kid, I went to my grandmother's house to watch it in color. And of course, we saw Uncle Walter Cronkite in color, but the rest of it was in black and white anyway.
Yeah.
So,
for the Apollo, specifically for the Apollo 11 also?
Yes,
I'm sure you watched
specifically for the Apollo 11, for Apollo 8. And I was 8 years old at that time, and I remember watching that at home. And that was, yeah.
Now, of course, we occasionally talk about Dark Shadows. Whenever they have one of those double or triple episodes, there was some kind of Apollo event.
Yeah, it was either Apollo or there was a UN event at one point, I think. But most of it was a NASA stuff. Yeah, it was.
George Cooper Lindsay's birthday. Also, they halted production for that. The networks covered it. So what was it like to see the Apollo 11 launch and landing?
Even particularly the 11. When I was a little bit older. I was 11. I'm sorry, I was 9. I was old enough at that point to have experienced the NASA thing before and become more and more interested in it. And so I felt the way a lot of adults felt at the time, I think worldwide, and that was you felt a part of it. You felt a part of it. The human race was a participant in this major event. I mean, obviously they flew the American flag, but it was kind of an emotional event. I mean, it wasn't as profound probably for me because my level of understanding was only so up here.
Good.
But I did feel like it was a human race kind of thing. So I got that out of it.
That's tremendous. I feel like it's unfortunate because since then only tragedies seemingly have done that. I think specifically 9/11.
Yes.
Or it's going to sound. I wish January 6th had that effect.
Yes.
In terms of galvanizing.
Right. Exactly. But it also wasn't Apollo 11. It was an international event. I mean, the entire
planet of course
was into that. 9/11. A lot of the planet went, "Welcome to the club."
They
almost.
did, but
Uh,
I seem to recall sympathy coming in from
yeah,
places I wasn't expecting it.
sure.
I mean, hostile. Like China,
Hmm.
NPR. Things that normally we think are as being hostile to the United States, but
Yeah,
in this case,
yeah. It was diplomatic.
kind.
It was definitely diplomatic, and it was also to let the United States know we appreciate and we respect your rage too.
Sure,
That it was that
sure.
happened within a few days after the shock. Yeah, I was in a college sociology class when that happened, and we were figuring that out.
Wow.
And it was actually the teacher. We were doing the sociology of mental health, which included the
Good God.
DSM-5 and talking about
Wow.
how society views mentally ill people and all this sort of thing. The same guy had taught the year before sociology of the terror state and terrorism, and I had
Oh
taken
my.
with him as well. And so there were 4 or 5 of us that had taken the next class with him. He's a very good professor and very popular in the social department. And so we took that next class. And so on that day, by the time the class was about 15 minutes in, radio reports were coming in. People were like, listening, with ear
Yeah.
telling them what was going, that the second plane had hit. And then we knew it was an act of terror. And
Yeah.
the professor then had we just talked about that for the rest of the class, and
Yeah.
much of us contributed what we'd been taught the semester before. So that was a unique and a coming together experience on a sort of a more intimate level.
I remember I was teaching I was teaching a cinema class, and a kid had just done a report on Patton,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and which is maybe not the best mindset to
Gung
be
ho.
in as you get this news.
Yes.
And I wandered into the bookstore, which was next door to the room I was in, and the guy who ran it, who was given to fanciful theories. If you wanted to see the mark of the beast, he was happy to show you a euro.
Sure.
He was a good guy, but he was that guy.
Barcodes, etc.
A-
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and I remember he said, "Well, I think a bomb went off the World Trade Center," and I said,
That was
"Really?"
conjecture. Yeah.
Yeah, I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." And the next words out of his mouth were Bin Laden.
Because in
It was
93 they had set a bomb off in the basement of the World
Yeah.
Trade Center.
Yeah, so he was
Yeah.
right on that.
Yeah.
And I said, "Come on, he's a Yaley." But no, seriously, so I went to the library was right next door to this complex,
Mhm.
and they already had a TV wheeled out.
Yeah.
And then they had like little classroom cells, and they had one in there. And I remember the receptionist, who just retired maybe a year or two ago,
Mhm.
was in there also, and we were just watching it when pow, with cosmic inevitability, as I like to say, the second plane hit.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to be there for that. And we didn't know what would happen. I went down the hall to the theater where the president of the school spoke to the upper school, talked to us, and I was up in the booth with my assistant Corinne, who is now head of epidemiology for Knox County. I'm real proud of her. Yeah, but this was a few years before that, and we were up there, and the anti sound in the theater was amazing. I don't know if you've ever experienced what I call anti sound, but it's where something is so solemn.
It's
It's like the
almost
sound gets sucked out of the
yeah,
room.
like a vacuum happens.
Yes,
Yes, I
I mean
have.
you couldn't hear footsteps. There was nothing. But you could you could hear the president's voice, and yeah, he's a tough guy, Pittsburgh guy. And no, we weren't shutting down school. It was going to be business as normal. It was going to establish as much normalcy as possible,
Mm.
and that was both a a move as wise as it was strangely insensitive, but I think he was aware of both of those things and chose to keep some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah.
With the funny thing was the next day in my class, we weren't gonna get anything done, so I just brought in a James Bond movie, just watch this,
Something.
and it
Yeah.
yeah, and it was Living Daylights. It's one of my favorite Bond movies, and where Al Qaeda's kind of the heroes
Yeah.
in it, because he's fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan and so on. And there was a line in the movie. We hadn't really put two and two together with that until it's at the end, and Karmalovi's having a concert, and all of James Bond's Al Qaeda pals show up right after the concert, and they said we had some problems with security at the airport,
Yeah. Jesus.
and the room just lost it.
I bet.
We just thought it was the funniest thing.
Yeah.
It was the most
It's
therapeutic laugh
yeah.
we had ever had. So that's In the Shadow of the Moon,
Yeah.
the great the great Apollo documentary, which
Well,
we've
I
now
think
come back to.
the link is that it was that kind of an event where
Yeah,
everybody sort of shared in it, and I remember at least one launch that took place during the school day. I can't remember which one it was. They just wheeled the television out, and we got to watch the Saturn V go off.
yeah.
So it was a big deal. It was huge.
I was the kid who always insisted that they, even deep into the shuttle missions, that for every shuttle launch, somewhere there had to be a TV on in the school
Sure.
to watch it. And unfortunately,
Yeah,
in '86, and I was the only person watching it.
I saw that in a bar. Believe that?
Yeah,
I was eating lunch or something, and it was like
so
they had it on the big TV, and it
yeah,
was
so I was the student council president. I was in 8th grade. I should have been in 9th grade, but
yeah,
I was unfairly graded and flunked, and so I had to report it to the school, and we had an assembly, and that was my job.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, and it was odd, many years later when we
sure,
lost the Columbia, I ended up being the person who gave the news and the sort of a prepared speech about that to the school, but as a teacher
right,
years later.
yeah,
So
kind of
you know if you,
almost in terms of the feeling that you must have had.
if you don't want a spaceship to blow up, don't have me on campus.
Yeah,
It's
Jeez.
pretty much the
Yeah, yeah,
news.
yeah.
I
Well,
you know
that was
one
the
thing,
nature of the NASA, missions.
yeah,
Was
one
that's
one thing in this movie that I feel like was shortchanged, and they couldn't spend too much time on it. Although you could do an entire documentary on it. I think you know where I'm going. Is Apollo 1.
yes, absolutely,
And the thing
absolutely.
that really, Jule loves to use this term shocked. Jule's very easily shocked. What shocked you about this movie or whatever? And
Hmm.
he's talking about a Laverne and Shirley TV movie or
Right.
something. And God bless him.
When the squig tones show up in the middle
That's
of
right. But I was genuinely shocked by the Gus Grissom story of, he's complaining, or he wanted to complain about the wires, but he chose not to because he'd get fired. Wow. Boy, bureaucracy.
yeah.
Unbelievable.
And I think it was also I think it was a misapprehension on his part too. I don't think he would have been fired, to be honest with you. I think they would have ripped the contractors a new one because
Sure.
they were doing that on a regular basis.
Well, Gus, I think, got a little bit of a bum rap in the right stuff,
Uh,
because what they don't have is the follow up where it really was a technical malfunction,
right.
and the hatch really did just blow, and Gus was the only astronaut to be in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo.
Yes.
Now, some of that was due to, pardon me, that was my father sneezing. It did not come from me. Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. But that was only because Alan Shepard needed tubes in his ears or
That's
something.
right. He didn't come back until later, and he was on one of the later Apollo moon
Yeah,
missions, which I
yeah,
thought was great for him because he really
sure.
wanted to go. So
Sure, sure. And he finally got rid of that golf ball that had been haunting him for so long.
yes,
Voodoo
yes.
currency.
Launched that into interstellar space. Yes. Yeah, I thought that it's true. I think there's a great deal more to be said about Apollo 1. There's a great deal more to be said about some of the other astronauts that really helped save the program. One of which was Borman. Borman took the bull by the horns, went before the Senate committee, um, broke down all of the problems that had caused this technical, including the pure oxygen problem, and figured out all of that and submitted a report. And it was Borman that got on the positive side of this, or he was one of the people that got on the positive side of this. Armstrong was also one of the people that was interviewed about it, because he was, I mean, they were all on various teams, even when they weren't on mission teams.
Mm-hmm.
They were involved
in
some way. So a lot of these astronauts were interviewed as PR movements, and Armstrong was among those that just was. Of course, he was probably one of the most even-tempered human beings that ever walked the planet. He was.
Yeah, you're not going to see him on Match Game anytime.
Yeah, I mean, he's just cool and analytical. Yeah, he would have been terrible at the blanks.
Just imagine.
Forget about it. No blanks. Would have filled in some physics formula or something.
An equation.
Yeah. But yeah, that whole thing was, and the whole thing, the weird thing about Apollo 1 is it actually made it possible for them to reach the moon by the end of the decade, because
really
it focused a lot, and NASA became more demanding about and more stringent about what the these various contractors were doing. Everybody from Boeing to Honeywell to Grumman. Grumman is the one, they were responsible for the LEM. So, Grumman was really put on the spot because of the weight of the LEM. They had to keep.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many designs for that. There's a great episode from the Earth to the Moon, maybe one of the best. That's called Spider. Mm-hmm. That's about just the constant changes in design for the LEM. I think it's one of humanity's great achievements. And a beautiful piece of sculpture just on its own.
It is. It has become representative of the entire lunar program. The lunar aspect of the program, obviously, because it is the thing by which we were able to actually land on the moon and explore the moon. And that wouldn't have been possible the first time if Armstrong, again, in the face of some serious stress, hadn't decided, well, I'm going to take it on manual and fly it over these giant boulders and these craters and land the thing with 30 seconds worth of fuel left.
Talk about a pilot moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, Buzz Aldrin there, Dr. Rendezvous was over there just, giving figures out and wondering, are we going to do this?
He's getting his communion kit ready.
Yeah. It's incredible. Every aspect of it is incredible. How it happened, why it happened, why it might not have happened. And we got a taste of it with Apollo 13, of course. What can go wrong.
Yeah.
And they actually, when it came to Apollo 11, they had 12 and 13 already set up 2 months apart. Because they didn't think they knew there was maybe even a slightly less than 50% chance that they were actually going to land this thing on the first.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah. I loved it. I can't remember which of the astronauts was talking about this. But I loved it when he was talking about the fact that they went through so many checks before through, to avoid abort on launch, just on
Yeah.
launch, that they would sit there. Well, they're probably going to abort the damn thing anyway. So, blah, blah, blah. And then you get down to about 3 minutes and you start thinking, hey, I think maybe
That's
we're
right.
going to leave.
Everything started lighting up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of them was saying they trained so much on manual override on the gimbals that they would he'd sit there and the switches are right there in front of him and he's going, I dare you not to do what you're supposed to do so I can actually fly this thing up into the atmosphere.
It was in the summer, because if it had been in the winter, one of them would have potentially had to go out, if there had been snow, and put some cardboard underneath one of the engines just so it could get some traction.
Yeah, the central of the five, I guess. That's another thing. The Saturn V, which was
what an achievement.
Enormous, even in comparison to the Mercury and the Gemini rocket. Yeah. It's just absolutely enormous. 5 engines on the first stage, of course, because you got to get it off the ground, get it out of gravity's pull. And then, unbelievable 3-stage rocket. I can't imagine. I mean, the film footage that they got of those launches.
How did they protect the cameras from the heat?
I don't know. It's iconic, though. I mean, it's incredible. You see the ice falling off because of all the liquid fuel and the liquid oxygen for oxidizing the thing.
Yeah.
There was no igniting like a regular engine, because there are no moving parts in this damn thing except for valves.
No, there's just a long wick.
Exactly. So basically, they had to load the oxygen into the, I guess it was nitrogen, hydrogen peroxide. There were various things that were in the actual fuel cell, and they oxidize it, and it would just bang, it would just go off in a controlled explosion.
Sure.
But incredible stuff. That was one thing that I did not grasp as a kid. I thought, these things are real engines, and they're, they got lots of moving parts in them.
No. It's just a big thing of chemicals. And Werner von Braun got in trouble because he was going around Florida buying Sudafed, and he was buying ammonia, and he was buying manure. Yeah. And he got in so much trouble for that. And he had to explain, no, this is for the Apollo program. They said, yeah, sure. We've heard that before.
Yes,
we'd like you to come downtown.
Why are you buying those contact tiny little time pills and grinding them up?
This is the old thing. This is how we do it.
But given all the technological stuff that they talk about, and the only thing that I kind of miss in this, and you don't miss it much because it's still pretty full in terms of astronaut accounts, you miss the presence of Armstrong a little bit. You get archival footage of him.
Well, Neil refused to talk. Yeah, that was one of the weird things. That's what a lot of the conspiracy people like to leap onto, is that he gave one interview or something and then stopped. But would appear on Dean Martin roasts. This is true.
Yes. Well, the whole thing was he was not that much of a hermit. He really wasn't, especially later in life. He did do a lot of public speaking. He did go to and accept awards or give awards at various functions, and did some of that stuff. And I think that was a product of his second marriage. I think that sort of brought him out of his shell a little bit. But he also had that farm in Ohio, and he just would disappear.
In '88, you remember he replaced Dean Martin on the Ultimate Event Tour with Frank and Sammy, and that's really where it was one disastrous performance in Branson. And Liza took over.
Showed up, he left. I mean, he fled.
Liza was his backup on Apollo.
Yes.
Also, Liza Minnelli, and her helmet is in the Smithsonian with mascara marks on the inside.
Only because her breath was going to be used as fuel for the third stage.
Oh no! God, she's a clean teen.
Okay.
NASA with a Z.
Yes. No. That would be Werner von Braun, not
Nazis. It's so close. It's so close, President Johnson. Just let me ooch it a little.
little
There's
bit.
room for more than one symbol on the
I
rocket.
want to wear the funny little hats.
Please let me wear my uniform. Please, when they launch it, let me wear my uniform. This is the least you can. I'll just be in my office. No one will see.
No one will see. I will lock the door.
I'll take a Polaroid for you. But
Oh, Lordy.
Warner,
But
I'm stuck with you.
the the tech is sort of at a certain point in this documentary, the tech is superseded by the emotional impact that it has on these astronauts.
As well it should.
Yes.
Because that's something we don't see. They are so controlled and they are so disciplined in talking about this stuff. You know, that they talk about, reaching the outer limit of the human capacity to maintain consciousness.
Mhm.
You mean you're about to die? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that those are classic astronaut moments.
And speaking of that, it was Armstrong and David Scott that were on the Gemini 8 that had a problem with the Agena.
Okay, I didn't know
spinning out of
it was
control.
Ed White or something.
Yeah.
Ed White was the moonwalk, right?
He was
I thought he was the moonwalk.
he was an EVA. He was an EVA in orbit around.
Or not moonwalk. I'm talking about the first spacewalk. Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Michael Jackson was the moonwalk.
I believe he was the first to do it. Ed White.
Yeah. Well, no. Now, technically, I think Titov was the first to do it for the Soviets.
First American, right?
Funny story. Titov. This is true story. This is not a McCravian whopper. Titov's suit overpressurized when he was outside of the Soyuz,
like a balloon,
and he couldn't get back in.
Oh Lord!
So he had to give himself a slight embolism by letting out pressure just to get back into the capsule. The Soviets had all sorts of wacky stuff with their program we don't hear a lot about. For instance, when they had to get a second and a third guy into the capsule, do you know what they did? This is true. They just ripped out circuitry
panels.
They just ripped out panels. It's like, well, we probably don't need this. Well, what do you mean we don't need it? We got another guy up there. What was it doing there in the front? It wasn't like it was a soda dispenser. What are you? So that was a good one.
It doesn't matter. You're probably going to die on reentry anyway.
Their heat shielding was really effective, but it was about 2 feet of wood. It was just solid wood, and it did the trick. And of course, the other weird Soviet thing is when they
landed on ground instead of ocean.
They landed on ground, yeah, and when they put a woman into space, the left in America went nuts, saying, "Oh, look how progressive the Soviets are," but the Soviets were more sexist than the Americans because their propaganda around it was, "Capsule's so simple, even woman can operate."
Yes, right.
No kidding, it was horrible.
And Soviet woman more superior than American woman.
Exactly.
Yeah, more superior than American man, probably.
I'm sure.
Also,
I'm sure.
But yes, you're right. So simple, even the woman can operate.
It was just astounding.
Yeah.
There's not enough. I would love a good documentary on the Soviet space program.
It
just doesn't exist.
Kind of. Well, I mean, for obvious reasons, the information that's gotten out. We've gotten more information in the last 20 years than the previous 50, 40. But it's still pretty sketchy in places.
Well, if Trump wins, we'll have a Soviet president again. So,
Jesus. It's or at least Russia will have a Soviet president again. Yeah, gross. Anyway, I mean that's another thing when they started talking about. I mean, they got spiritual about some of that stuff. Obviously, being there in space and seeing the Earth rise, which is one of the big deals of Apollo 8. But everybody saw it after that. But that was a huge thing. But that was also that thing was a huge connection to us down here on Earth too.
Yes.
To see that that was really profound, I think, for a lot of people.
What a perspective, and to think that even after that, there are flat earthers. What a bizarre thought that in 2024
All I keep thinking about and also fake moon landing
Of
stuff.
course, those people.
I keep thinking of Capricorn One every time.
Well, that's a great movie. I love
It
that
is a
movie.
great movie, but it's a movie,
It did not help,
Didn't help.
because I mean, if you want verisimilitude, if you want someone to make a reliable case for something, you get O.J. Simpson
Hmm.
as one of your astronauts,
Right.
and yeah.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, one of the astronauts mentioned that at the end of it, they have
They talk about the
tail end. They
conspiracy.
talk about the conspiracy theories, and one of them says just flat out, "Look, it's not important to me. The truth is the truth. I was there."
Yeah,
And the another one said, "You know, it's really hard for two people to keep their mouths shut. Just
I,
imagine a couple of 100,000 people.
that's
You
what
know?
that's my argument. How do you keep this quiet with that many people?
Yeah,
But I mean, this says everything about the moon landing conspiracy you need to say. Actually, there's nothing you need to say. It's codswallop. But the greatest media proponent is Joe Rogan.
yeah, yeah.
So there you go. I mean, it
Right.
completely disqualifies
Yeah.
itself. Boom, right there.
And Alex Jones is right there too. If he can get it,
Oh,
if he can get an extra, so that
oh.
Alex Jones right now is at the forefront of the Democrats control the weather, and that's why we're getting.
What?
Yes, that's why we're
It's
getting all of this bad weather blowing up our red states. It's like,
You're kidding.
oh no, I'm not kidding. I am absolutely not kidding. I have a Facebook friend who well she was somebody that I used to know quite well, but haven't been in close contact with for years. Who is real conspiracy theorist and is also propagates this stuff.
Sweet.
Yeah,
That's unbelievable. The
it's
weather.
it's crazy.
You
Like
know,
Vincent Price, and his
if
dirigible
if you follow
world.
didn't we talk about the Georgia Guidestones being blown up recently? Didn't that come up on a?
It may have,
I
yes,
thought it did, but
yes.
they were blown up by somebody, and there's all sorts of stuff about the Georgia Guidestones and the Club of Rome and the Bilderbergs and so on and so forth. And if you go to the heart of it, one of the core documents, and it's also on the Guidestones, is about incredibly reducing. This is a complete tangent, but reducing the world population vastly.
Yeah, of course.
And it suddenly occurred to me, uh, what if you wanted to do this and you wanted to do it in a way that would seem kind of clean and leave have a eugenics kind of after effect, and what if you convinced some of the most dim-witted people in the country, people you really not necessarily helping the progress of the country,
Right.
arguably, you convinced them with a small plague that vaccines don't exist, so that or are
Or
ineffective
unaffected.
or are evil or something like that. And so when the big plague comes along, you see
Right.
where I'm going with this?
Yes, I do.
It's pretty diabolical,
Yes.
but God, because I just want some master explanation for so many people doing things even dumber than I'm used to people in large numbers doing.
Well, one of the reasons for the anti-vax thing, especially about COVID-19, is to blunt the efficacy of the opposing political party,
Sure.
and that's what they did, and
Yeah.
and literally did it on both ends of the beast, basically. Because once the party that was propagating this got into power, they proceeded to ignore COVID-19 for months, pretend that it was going to go away. And meanwhile, as has been said in recent hours, 45 was giving COVID-19 machines, because it was before the test, to,
To Putin.
yeah, so
Yeah. What a guy.
even believe their own BS.
What a
Right?
guy. So back to when humans did great things,
Yes,
the
exactly.
Apollo program.
Yeah.
Um, if someone enjoyed this movie, what would you recommend they watch next?
Um, From the Earth to the Moon
Yeah.
and First Man.
Yeah, I want to see that. You were talking about that the other night.
It's very good. It gives you a non-heroic look at Armstrong. I mean, heroic in its way, but also very down to earth, because it also explores the intimacy of his family relationships and with his kids. And he lost a young daughter when she was only like 2.5 years old to brain cancer.
Oh, Jesus
Christ.
Christ.
Yeah. And so they talk about that and his relationship to his wife and the stress that it put all these astronauts under to be in this program, and their wives. And so it builds through Apollo 1 and the disaster, and it actually starts with him being a test pilot, and then builds him into the program, and takes it from there all the way up through until Apollo 11. So
did you, when you were, you go back to when you were a kid, and I think we'll probably wrap up with this. Did you have a favorite astronaut?
Oh, it would have been. I was Armstrong, probably. Yeah, probably, because he would have been. The first one I was aware of and was really keen on was Alan Shepard.
Sure.
But Armstrong probably made the biggest impression on me because of the magnitude of the mission.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that he'd been in the Gemini program. I mean, as a kid, you don't have those details, but yeah.
Cool. I would say I like Harrison Jack Schmidt. He's a scientist. Yeah, he was one of the first. I think he's a geologist. Hardcore scientist to go up there. I think that was cool.
Missions, yeah, in the later missions, they sent real scientists, not just test pilots up there. Yeah.
And Alan Bean, because Alan Bean was a real goofball. He was a funny guy.
Yeah.
And a fine artist. His paintings, his space paintings, are just breathtaking. They're really Robert McCall level great.
Very cool.
So yeah. All right. Well, this has been terrific. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure I will see you soon. Next few days.
Absolutely. We're gonna hunt her down. We'll
yeah. Be safe.
Done.
Okay. All right. Take care, sir.
Care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.